My family treated me like their plan B for 21 years, but when they demanded I drop out of college to pay my brother's $50K tuition, I packed one suitcase and vanished. Now they're broken. I'm 21 years old, studying in my second year of college, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically destroyed my family. Or, well, the family I thought I had. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was a kid and still believed my parents loved me the same way they loved my siblings. I don't remember much from that time, honestly, but what I do remember perfectly is when I was like 12 years old and I heard my mom tell my dad that I was their plan B, literally those words, plan B, as if I were a backup option in case something went wrong with James or Grace. At that moment, I didn't fully understand it. You know, I was 12 and thought maybe I had heard wrong, but looking back, I should have seen it coming from then. My family was always weird about expectations. My dad is a lawyer, like successful and all that, makes good money, and always had this idea that his children were going to be important professionals, people with prestigious careers. James, my older brother, was the golden child, the one who was going to follow in my dad's footsteps and become a lawyer too. Grace, my younger sister, was the perfect princess, the one who got the best grades and participated in every possible extracurricular activity. And me, well, I was there in the middle, doing my thing, getting good grades but never the best, participating in things but never really standing out. I was always the invisible one, the one who was fine but not excellent, you know what I mean? Like I existed, but didn't matter as much. Throughout high school, I watched my parents pour everything into James. They paid for super expensive tutoring classes for the college entrance exam, bought him a new laptop every time he needed one, took him to visit universities all over the country. When Grace started high school, it was the same, maybe even worse. My mom enrolled her in a million activities, violin lessons, debate club, swim team, literally everything she could put on her college application. I asked for guitar lessons once, and my dad told me there was no budget. But 2 weeks later, they bought Grace a violin for like $2,000. That's how things were in my house. When it was my turn to apply to universities, I basically did it alone. My parents told me to choose something practical, not to get too ambitious, to think in realistic terms. My dad literally told me, "Not everyone can be lawyers or doctors, Isabella. Someone has to do the normal work." He told me that while we were having dinner and James was talking about his plans to go to an elite law school. I remember I stayed quiet and my mom passed me more salad as if nothing had happened. I ended up choosing to study social work at a state university, not because it was my dream, but because it seemed practical enough that my parents wouldn't complain but interesting enough that I wouldn't die of boredom. The first year of college was weird. I lived on campus, had my own space for the first time in my life, and started to realize a lot of things. I made friends who came from normal families, families where parents treated all their children equally, where there wasn't an obvious favorite. One of my friends, Rachel, told me once how her parents threw her a surprise party for making the honor roll, and I was like, do they really do that? Because when I made honor roll in high school, my mom just said that's nice and kept watching TV. But when James did it, it was like he had won the Nobel Prize. Seriously. My dad even posted photos on Facebook and everything. I started my second year thinking maybe things were going to get better. That maybe now that I was older and more independent, my parents were going to start seeing me differently. How stupid I was. Honestly. It was October. I remember the exact date because it was October 15th, a Friday, and my parents sent me a message saying they needed me to come home that weekend for an important family meeting. I thought maybe someone was sick or something. I don't know. They had never had an emergency family meeting before. I took the bus Friday afternoon, got home around 7 at night, and everyone was sitting there in the living room like it was an intervention or something. My dad started by saying we needed to have an honest conversation about the family's future. James was sitting on the couch looking uncomfortable. Grace was on the floor playing with her phone. And my mom was in her favorite chair with that expression she always had when she was about to say something she knew I wasn't going to like. My dad explained they had been reviewing the family finances and things were tighter than they thought. James was about to start law school, which is super expensive, like $50,000 a year or something. And Grace was going to start college in 2 years, and they wanted to make sure she could go wherever she wanted without worrying about money. Up to that point, everything made sense. I mean, I understood that law school was expensive and that they wanted to plan ahead. But then my dad looked directly at me and said, We've been thinking about solutions and we believe the best option is for you to leave college and get a full-time job to help with your siblings' expenses. I sat there trying to process what I had just heard. For me to leave college? To pay for James and Grace's education? My mom intervened with that sweet, manipulative voice she used when she wanted to convince you of something horrible, saying I had always been the most practical in the family, the most mature, the one who understood the value of sacrifice. I asked them if they were serious, and my dad explained, with his lawyer tone all logical and reasonable, that it made sense from a financial perspective. James was going to be a lawyer and would earn enough money to pay me back everything I invested in his education. Grace had potential to get important scholarships but needed the resources now to develop that potential. And me, well, according to my dad, social work wasn't a career that required such an expensive college degree. I could get cheaper certifications or work in the field while studying at night. Everything was so calculated, so cold, as if they were discussing an investment in the stock market and not my life. My brother James finally spoke and said he hadn't asked for this, that he could get student loans or work. But my mom cut him off immediately, saying they weren't going to allow their son to be in debt for the rest of his life when there was another solution. Another solution. That's what she called me. A solution. Not their daughter, not a person with her own dreams and plans. Grace didn't say anything, just kept looking at her phone as if none of this had to do with her. I tried to reason with them. Explained that I also had plans, that I wanted to finish my degree, that I had worked hard to get where I was. My dad interrupted me and said that was exactly the work Firo's problem. That I thought too much about myself and not about the family. The conversation went on for like 2 hours, and every argument I made, they dismantled with their twisted logic. When I said I could get more financial aid, my dad said that wouldn't be enough, and that besides James needed it more. When I suggested James work while studying, my mom said that would affect his grades and his future. When I mentioned Grace could go to a cheaper university, they both looked at me as if I had suggested something horrible. In the end, my dad gave me an ultimatum. I had until Sunday to decide. Leave college and help the family, or continue being selfish and manage on my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in my old room, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how I had gotten to this point. I reviewed my finances, calculated how much I needed to finish college, thought about all the possible options. I called Rachel at like 2 inches the morning and told her everything. She was furious, literally yelled at me over the phone saying that was abuse, that it was manipulation, that she couldn't believe parents would do that to their daughter. We talked for hours, and in the end, she told me that if I needed a place to stay, I could go to her apartment, that she and her roommates had a couch where I could sleep until I got organized. Saturday morning, I went down to breakfast and my parents acted as if everything was normal, as if they hadn't asked me to sacrifice my future for my siblings. My mom made me pancakes, my favorites, or, well, what I used to think were my favorites before realizing she only made them when she wanted to manipulate me, and asked if I had thought about their proposal. Proposal. As if it were a job offer and not emotional blackmail. I told her yes, I had thought about it, and my answer was no, that I wasn't going to leave college, that I was going to finish my degree and they were going to have to find another way to finance James and Grace's education. My dad's face changed completely. He turned red, like I had never seen him that furious, and started yelling that I was ungrateful, that after everything they had done for me, I couldn't make this small sacrifice for the family. Small sacrifice, that's what he called it, as if abandoning my dreams and my future was something insignificant. My mom started crying, those fake tears she always used when she wanted to make me feel guilty, saying she couldn't believe her own daughter was so selfish, that how was she going to be able to sleep at night knowing her siblings were suffering because of me? I told them it wasn't my responsibility to pay for my siblings' education, that they had chosen to have 3 children and should have planned better. My dad told me that if that was my decision, then clearly I didn't value my family and that maybe it would be better if I left. My mom nodded and added that if I couldn't contribute, then there was no point in me continuing to live under their roof using their resources. Can you believe it? They were literally kicking me out because I didn't want to be their cash cow. I told them fine, that I was going to leave, and my dad told me I had until the end of the day to pack my things and get out of his house. I went up to my room and started packing everything I could into 2 large suitcases and my backpack, clothes, books, my laptop that I had bought myself working in the summer, important documents, photos, though looking back, I don't know why I wanted to take photos of a family that clearly had never really loved me. James came into my room while I was packing and stood at the door without saying anything. He finally spoke and said he was sorry, that he didn't want this to happen like this. I asked him if he was going to do anything about it, if he was going to tell our parents this was wrong, if he was going to reject his education paid for with my sacrifice, and he said nothing, just looked down. And right there I knew. He wasn't going to do anything. He had always been the favorite and wasn't going to risk that position for me. Grace showed up when I was bringing my suitcases down the stairs. She asked me where I was going, and I explained I was leaving because our parents wanted me to drop out of college to pay for her education. She looked confused and said she hadn't asked for that, but she didn't do anything to stop me either. I went down the stairs, and my parents were in the living room watching me pack the car I had borrowed from Rachel. They didn't say goodbye, didn't try to stop me. There wasn't a moment of regret or realization of what they were doing. My mom just said she hoped I would learn what it meant to be part of a family, and my dad added that when I realized my mistake and wanted to come back, I would have to apologize. I drove back to college crying the whole way. I called Rachel and told her I was heading to her apartment. When I arrived, she was waiting for me at the door with her roommates. They helped me bring up my things and made me tea. I spent that whole night on Rachel's couch thinking about what I was going to do now. I didn't have enough money saved to pay for college on my own. My financial aid covered like half the costs, but the rest had been paid by my parents. I started researching options at 3 inches the morning, completely desperate. Monday morning, I went to talk to my academic advisor. I explained the situation, well, a summarized version because I still couldn't talk about everything without crying. She was incredible, literally sat with me for 2 hours and we reviewed all possible options. Turns out there was more financial aid available than I knew about. Specific scholarships for students in difficult situations, work-study programs that paid more than normal. She helped me fill out a bunch of forms and write letters explaining my situation. She also connected me with the campus housing office that had some rooms available at reduced prices for emergency cases. Within a week, I had a plan. I had gotten more financial aid, a 20-hour-a-week job at the library that paid decent, and a small room in one of the campus residences that cost like half of normal. It wasn't perfect. I was going to have to work hard and wasn't going to have much extra money, but I could continue studying. I also called my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, who had always been the family black sheep because she had chosen to be an artist instead of something practical. I told her everything, and she got furious. She told me she had always known my mom had favorites, but this was another level. Aunt Linda offered me financial help. Not much because she didn't have a lot of money either being an artist, but she told me she could give me like $200 a month for expenses, and I could stay at her house during breaks if I needed a place. I cried when she told me that because it was the first time in a long time that someone in my family made me feel like I mattered. I moved into my dorm room like 2 weeks after all the drama. It was small, like really small, basically a box with a bed and a desk. But it was mine and no one could take it away from me. The first few weeks were hard. I was working, studying, trying to adjust to living completely alone for the first time. I didn't talk to my parents at all. They didn't try to contact me either. James sent me a message like a week later asking how I was, but I didn't respond. I was still too angry. I focused on my classes and my work, trying not to think about everything that had happened. Rachel and her roommates were amazing. They invited me to dinner with them, included me in their plans, and basically became my chosen family. Like a month after I left, James called me. I let it go to voicemail the first 3 times, but finally answered. He told me he needed to talk to me, that he had something important to tell me. We met at a coffee shop near campus. When he arrived, he looked bad, like tired and stressed. He didn't have that perfect golden child air he had always had. He sat down and started apologizing, said he had been a coward for not defending me, that he had let our parents treat me like garbage all my life because it was convenient for him to be the favorite. I asked him why he was telling me this now, and he explained he had been in therapy, that his therapist had made him see a lot of things about our family. Then he dropped the bomb, told me he was going to leave law school, that he had never wanted to be a lawyer. That was our dad's dream, not his. What he really wanted was to be a teacher, work with kids, do something he felt had meaning. Our parents had obviously gone crazy when he told them. My mom had cried for days, and my dad had called him a failure and a waste. He told me now he understood what I had felt all my life. That pressure to be who they wanted instead of who you were. I didn't know what to tell him. Honestly. Part of me was like, welcome to the club, and another part felt some satisfaction that he finally understood. My parents started sending me messages like 2 months after I left. They were long messages full of guilt tripping, saying the family was suffering because of me, that Grace was stressed watching the family break apart, that James had made bad decisions because of my influence. Everything was my fault according to them. My mom sent me a particularly horrible message saying she had given me life and the least I could do was help my siblings. That's what a good sister would do. I responded once. A long message where I explained exactly how they had made me feel all my life, how they had never valued me, how I had always been the plan B and nothing more. I told them it wasn't my job to sacrifice my life for my siblings, that they, as parents, had the responsibility to treat all their children equally, and they had failed miserably. My dad responded with a super cold message saying, clearly I didn't understand what it meant. Is to be part of a family and that when I grew up and matured, maybe we could have a real conversation. That was what finished convincing me. There was no way to reason with them. They simply were never going to see that what they had done was wrong. Other relatives started contacting me too. My grandparents, some uncles, cousins. Turns out, my parents had been telling their version of the story, where I was the spoiled, selfish daughter who had abandoned her family in their time of need. I had to explain the truth to several of them. Some believed me, others clearly thought I was exaggerating or that there was some misunderstanding. My grandmother told me I should be more understanding with my parents, that they only wanted the best for all their children. I asked her how forcing me to leave college was the best for me, and she stayed quiet, but still said I should consider helping even if just a little. In December, something happened that made me realize how toxic my parents really were. I found out from James they were selling the family house. They didn't consult me, didn't tell me anything, just put the house up for sale. That was the house where I had grown up, where all my childhood memories were. When I asked my mom about it, she told me that since I had decided not to be part of the family, I no longer had the right to have an opinion on family decisions. That hurt me more than I expected, not because of the house itself, but because of what it meant, that they had really erased me from their lives completely. I decided to block my parents' numbers after that. I couldn't keep receiving their manipulative messages. I needed peace of mind to focus on my life and finishing the semester. It was liberating in a way, like taking a weight off my shoulders. Without their constant voices in my head telling me I was selfish or that I was destroying the family, I could start to see things more clearly. I realized it had never been my responsibility to keep the family together. That was their responsibility as parents, and they had failed. The semester ended well. I got good grades despite all the drama. Rachel invited me to spend the holidays with her family, and it was beautiful to see what a normal family was like. Her parents treated all their children with the same love and respect, celebrated everyone's achievements equally, supported each other without expecting absurd sacrifices. It made me realize I wasn't crazy, that my family really was dysfunctional, and what they had asked of me wasn't normal or acceptable. In January, at the start of the second semester, Grace contacted me. She sent me a long message, apologizing for not doing anything when I left, for not defending me, for being part of the problem. She explained she had started seeing things differently after James left law school. Our parents had put all the pressure on her now, expected her to be perfect in everything, to compensate for having 2 children who had disappointed them. According to them, she told me she finally understood why I had left, that she was also considering distancing herself when she went to college. I started talking to Grace regularly after that. It was weird because we had never been close. She had always been the perfect princess and I the invisible one, but now we had something in common. We were both seeing our parents for what they really were, controlling and manipulative people who only valued us in terms of what we could do for them. Grace told me how our parents pressured her constantly, how every grade that wasn't perfect was a disaster, how she had anxiety attacks all the time trying to meet their impossible expectations. In February, I found a support group at the university for students who came from toxic families. It sounds silly maybe, but it helped a lot to hear the stories of other people who had gone through similar things. There were people who had been disowned by their families for different reasons, people who had had to choose between their happiness and their parents' approval, people who were rebuilding their lives after cutting contact with abusive families. It made me feel less alone and gave me tools to process everything that had happened. One of the group counselors suggested, maybe I could use my experience to help other students in similar situations. He connected me with the Student Services Department that was looking to create a peer support program for students facing family crises. They offered me a paid position to help develop the program, use my experience to create resources and strategies that could help other students. It was like 15 hours a week and paid better than my library job, so I accepted. Now I'm finishing my second year, and things are much better than I would have imagined when I left my parents' house that day in October. I have my own space, work on something that matters to me, my grades are good, I have friends who really care about me. My parents tried to contact me again like a month ago through a cousin. They wanted me to come to a family dinner for my dad's birthday. I told my cousin I had no interest in reconnecting with people who had treated me as if I was worth nothing. I'm not angry anymore, honestly. I'm just at peace with my decision. James is working as a teaching assistant while finishing his teaching certification and says he's happier than he ever was studying law. Grace is doing therapy and plans to go to a public university next year instead of the expensive universities my parents want her to consider. Aunt Linda is still amazing and visits me every couple of months to take me to lunch and make sure I'm okay. And me? Well, I'm learning what it means to value myself, not needing approval from people who were never really going to give it. Last week, a student came to the support program with a story similar to mine. Her parents wanted her to leave college to take care of her younger siblings, and she didn't know what to do. I was able to sit with her, share my experience, show her there were options, that she didn't have to sacrifice herself for people who didn't value her. After the session, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like everything I went through had been worth it, because now I could use that to help someone else. And that's enough for now, I guess.